Thank you for tuning in to the Mighty Dragon today. While I go on a trip back in time to some of my very first interviews on my blog, which was quite a few years ago, here with me today is writer, and I would have said screenwriter before, but now I'm saying writer, Mr. David Alton Hedges. Hello,
Hello.
how are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good. I can see some rather spectacular things in your background. And I was actually, this is probably touching on my first question. When I first interviewed you years ago, you were on set. You were actually witnessing a film that you'd written being filmed, Scorpion King, Book of Souls. And I assume some of these little trinkets in the background are from those days, maybe?
I
No.
think so. Yeah, it's kind of a bizarre collection back there, but you're
Yeah.
probably right.
Yes. How has this experience changed you actually watching your script being filmed? How has this changed you as a writer?
It's interesting because, by the time you get on set, you've probably written many scripts.
Yeah.
And the script that they're shooting is not necessarily your favorite one, right?
Oh, right.
For
Okay.
for various reasons, right? You may have collaborated or, put things in that, wouldn't have been your first choice. But the first thing that struck me is that I wish I had done another pass for dialogue.
Right.
Because
Okay.
all of a sudden actors are saying your lines,
Yeah.
and nobody's more critical than you hearing an actor try to make your lines sound good.
Okay.
Because what looks good on paper sometimes doesn't sound so great, right? So
Right.
I used to do a thing where I would get people together and do table reads. And I know a lot of writers say never do a table read. I think that's usually with professionals. Never do a table read with people that are actually going to produce your movie if you don't have to, because they may get cold feet if they don't like how it sounds. But
Right.
the great thing about that is you get to hear your dialogue, and sometimes something you thought was wonderful is just awful the minute someone has to say it. And you see these poor actors struggling with it, right? So that was the first thing that struck me. And the second thing that struck me is that, a screenplay is maybe 105 pages long ish. So there's not a lot of words in there. When you actually look at a page, there's a lot of white space.
Yeah. Or there should be, right?
There should be, yeah.
Yeah.
Depends on the script. But sometimes, I think we tend to not pay enough attention to some of the secondary characters. And then when you see an actor who has an opportunity to maybe say 4 lines or 6 lines in your movie, and that's very important to them, and they're putting all their effort into it, and and then you realize that for you those lines were maybe just kind of throwaway, right? You just didn't think much about it. It was just exposition or something.
Yeah.
You're just
Yeah.
moving the story forward, right?
Yeah.
And you,
Yeah.
you call them man on corner. So it made me realize that you need to really look at every line as an opportunity for someone else to really show their talent too, because there's a lot of really talented people that just aren't at the level yet where they could be a named
Right.
character or a star. So
Yeah.
that was probably my biggest regret, was feeling like I hadn't. I wish I would have spent a little more time realizing that even the most minor character is someone who just really is wants it to be their moment to shine.
Right. Okay. So I guess what you were saying, first of all, the reverse happened when you heard dialogue that was just kind of like, oh, you need to add that for some exposition. And it just sounded wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and also the reverse did happen, where they some of the lines that maybe the way I would have delivered them wouldn't have been very good, but they managed to do something with it to make it
Yeah.
sound better. And the director will sometimes say, "Oh, let's change this word, or let's do that."
Yeah.
And Don was he likes to rewrite, so he did a lot of rewriting of scenes and dialogue, and that was interesting too, because he's made a lot of movies, so he's had a lot of experience, and so he kind of knew what he wanted. So
Right.
initially I was like, oh, why did he change that? Like, I like
Yeah.
that scene.
Yeah.
But and then later I'm like, okay, I get it. I see what he was doing there, and also sometimes the scene just doesn't work based on where you are. Sometimes the weather can get involved, right? Prevent
Yeah.
this great scene from happening. So these are things that you can't really plan for, but you need to
Yes.
be ready to, you know tackle those things.
I think that reminds me of when I interviewed Philip Noyce, the director, and he said that about Dead Calm, that the weather, Mother Nature, was actually the director of that film because it was just as it was on that day. So
Yeah,
yes, so
yeah.
great. That was Memories of the Scorpion King. So over the pandemic, did you use that opportunity to sort of continue on existing projects or start something new?
Well, I did, and it should have been easier, and it was harder. And I think because no one knew what was going to happen, and no one was meeting in person, so there were just fewer meetings happening, and there's a lot of you experience this. There's just a lot of fear, and not just personal fear for people and their
Yeah.
families, and then not knowing what was going to happen with the industry. I mean, basically everything shut down. So
Yes.
that should have been an opportunity for me to lock myself away and then write something amazing. But it really sort of evened out because the free time I had to write was sort of balanced by dealing with all these other things. And then in this country, we had a lot of sort of social upheaval, maybe is the right word.
Yes.
So that created an interesting sort of thing for me, kind of deciding where my projects were going. Because at that time, I was pitching Universal on the Canine reboot.
Yes.
So when that initially was happening, not the best time for that pitch. So
Right.
that was a concern, and I think I probably spent more time grinding on it and having them, not sure if they were going to do it because of what was going on, not just production wise, but just sort of socially in our country. And then it's funny because you always imagine that if you had all this extra time, you would just get your best book written, right? But it just sort of evened out because there were so many other things going on, and just trying to get people to meet was very difficult, and to read, because I think everybody was at home.
Yeah.
So that really sort of slowed the pace, and I feel like we're coming out of it now. I think things are starting to get back to normal a little bit.
Yeah.
It's still very difficult for everybody, especially in production with the different tiers. I don't know if you're familiar with how they're doing it. You probably are, but it just sounds awful. I haven't seen it, but having these different, tiers of people that can interact and trying to make that happen on set, it's hard enough anyway, right? To make a movie or a show.
Yes.
It's just chaos. So having to do it, in under those circumstances, I don't know how they're doing it, but I feel like people are kind of ready to hear more things again and hear more ideas, and sort of, I don't know if everybody's back to work. I don't think so, but
Yeah.
that'll make things better.
I think a few of my writer buddies on Facebook, they're all like, get all your scripts in, they're being snapped up like anything right now. I was like, oh, right, oh my
Oh,
God.
okay.
Like, apparently,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just Facebook gossip, I don't know, but yeah. Oh,
It makes sense. It was
yeah.
just such a big slowdown, and
Yeah.
I think it was probably mostly because no one was sure if and when production was going to start up again.
Yes.
So why would
Yeah.
you buy something if you're not sure if and when you're going to make it, right? So
Okay. Yeah. So do you think K9 will happen, or what do you think?
it's up and running again. So
Oh my
we
God.
yeah, we had some considerations that it couldn't be like the original. I mean, the world has
Yeah.
changed too much, and that's okay. And so we had those concerns with the story, and I think we've gotten past them pretty well, and feel like we're moving in a direction with the story where everybody feels comfortable, and we feel like it's going to be something that everybody will be happy with,
Oh,
right?
great.
Because you got to make everybody happy. You can't make
Yes.
half the people happy. So
Yes.
that's always tricky anyway. But anytime you add kind of some of these other elements, it makes it a little even, a little harder.
I guess it is harder because you've got something that there's like a whole sort of oldies like me with the whole nostalgia thing. Like when I look back at Star Wars and things like that, and I'm super critical when anything comes out that's, associated with it. So I guess you've just got
Yes,
to try
definitely.
and please all the new people and the old people as well. And it's quite a difficult task, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. Reboots are funny because they're like the original, but not like the original.
Yeah.
So, it's this funny game where you want to call back some of the things that people like about it and that you like about it, but not make it seem like it's just a rehash. You know,
Yeah,
it's a
exactly.
delicate balance.
Yes.
And for me, you know, it's the first law enforcement script I've worked on.
Right.
Despite the fact that I did that for so many years,
Yes.
for some reason, I've never done any sort of police procedural or law enforcement related script, which is strange, right?
Why is
And,
that, do you think? Why is that?
I think it's because I didn't come into the business with that type of um, work. I came in with a very different type of, more kind of like historical science fiction type of stuff. So the fact that I'd done that job didn't really matter to
Yeah.
anybody at that point. And this is the first time it's really come up. So I think it's, you know, like a lot of things, I know so much about it, it almost gets in the way
Right.
because it's a movie, right? You
Yeah.
know, it's not an 8 hour documentary on how to do it. So
Yeah.
you have to remember it's entertainment. And
Yeah.
you know, I sort of use other people to tell me if this is realistic enough, which sounds absurd because I should know, right? But some of the stuff that's real sounds ridiculous, and some of the stuff that's ridiculous actually, to me, actually works story wise. So,
Yes.
you know,
Right.
I'm
Okay.
I'm learning to not worry about that and let them kind of decide, like, oh, does that work or not? So,
Yeah, hilarious. That's great though. I was going to ask you actually about California, and a few of the filmmaker people that I've interviewed recently have said you don't need to be there anymore if you're really serious about this. You can be anywhere, and actually, you should head to Atlanta because that's where it's all happening now. What do you think about that? Do you think California is still the right place, or?
I think Hollywood is still in Hollywood, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. However, I think that in times past, it was you were either working in Hollywood or you weren't working at all.
Mm,
And I think the digital age and the internet has really changed that. So I don't think it's either you're in or you're out. It's very difficult to break into Hollywood. Everybody knows this. And what people don't understand is it's not just difficult to break in; it's very difficult to stay in. I mean,
yes.
it's always trying to sort of spin you out. So, you know, and every year there's a new crop of fresh, you know, graduates from film schools whose dream it is to be there. So it's highly competitive, and that's where, you know, a lot of the money is. So that's where the you know, the most of the big productions are happening. But I do agree that, you know, there are so many places you can go now and find other creative people. And I think it used to be, you know, well, if you're not in Hollywood, you're in New York, or you're in Austin, or Atlanta. And now I
Mm,
think it's anywhere. I think
yeah.
if you can find people that are creative anywhere, and you can, you know, create things together, writers and filmmakers, and sort of support each other and help each other, I think there's not only a chance that you can find success that way, but, you know, a new opportunity to get the attention of Hollywood by doing that. You know,
Right.
I've seen a lot of projects that have come from sort of outside that have been self produced, that have gotten people agents and meetings, and, you know, have been optioned. So I think that's true now more than ever. That if you really want to create, you don't have to be there.
Yeah.
But if that's your dream to be there, then it's probably pretty hard to do it from somewhere else.
Yes, yes. We're talking about streaming and stuff like that, and the way that audiences have changed, a shift out of the cinema, streaming, Netflix and Prime and everything else. Has this changed you as a writer with how you want to progress in your career at all?
I think it has, I'm not sure that anybody really knows yet what it means. You know, it's changing so quickly.
Yeah.
And, you know, you think back to not so long ago where, you know, movie actors didn't do television. If they did, it
Oh,
meant their
yeah.
movie career was over, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
now they want to, you know, and
Yeah.
by television, you know, television now means streaming, right? So
Mm,
yeah, I think it is a brave new world for that. And I think, you know, it is about opportunity. Um, And I think it allows creative people to think more about different ways to, create content. It's not so much like I have to write a feature screenplay, and then I have to get an agent, have to get noticed, and has to get
Yeah.
bought. Now I think creative people can get together and talk about putting together really anything, their own limited series, and there's a chance for it to, go somewhere or find the right people.
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going. I mean, it's really fascinating to watch this unfold, and I do think it's just nothing but opportunity for a lot of
Yeah.
creative people.
But do you think as a writer you'd ultimately like to see your film on screen and a cinema sort of huge screen for the masses to watch? Do you think that's what it's
Yeah,
all
I think
about?
that's
Yeah.
that's yeah, I think that's every screenwriter, and
Yes.
also depending on, what movies influenced you. Um, you want that director to direct it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's so rare now, and everything indicates to me that it's probably going to get more and more rare that just somebody's spec will make it to the screen, the big screen,
Yeah.
and that's okay, right?
Mhm.
Because the world has changed so much, and
Yeah.
people no longer sort of look down on the computer screen as sort of a lesser form of entertainment. I mean, if anything, I think people might be more rabid about their favorite, streaming show that they just
Yeah.
binge watch and then watch again and again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, there's always going to be hopefully James Bond movies and,
Oh my
you know,
gosh. Have you
Top
seen
Gun
it?
and stuff like that. I have not. Well, I think it
I
opens later this week. You guys got it a week early. I don't know how you
I
did that,
guess
but
so, yes. Oh
yeah,
my God,
makes
I'm
sense.
still
Yeah.
in recovery. You must let me know what you think, your theories
Okay.
on
Yeah.
this. Yes, I'll be very
Yeah.
interested to hear that.
No,
I'm
I
still
can't wait.
recovering from this experience.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was a
Fantastic.
wonderful, wonderful cinema experience that actually I've not had in a very long time. So it was really cool. Finally, the last question. Tell me about Werewolf, who I thought was a pervert on Instagram following my account. Werewolf, who's that?
That's great.
Tell me about Werewolf.
That's a nonfiction book that I wrote about my partner, my canine partner, Bragg. And I was a police canine handler for 8 years. And, I'd already been writing at that point quite a bit, sort of, on my days off. I was writing scripts and, sending them out and trying to get people, interested in what I was writing. And right away, when I got the dog, I realized that this was going to be a very unique experience, and he was a very unique dog. So I kept everything. I just started taking notes,
Oh,
and I'd been a police officer for a fair bit of time at that point, so I had an idea that this already how this was going to go. Because I already knew the job, and I knew this was really going to change how I did the job. So I just every night I was taking notes, and it couldn't have unfolded more like a book if I planned it. I mean, it really was probably the most changing experience of my life working with that dog. I mean, he was just this presence, and he was this personality, and then after a while you sort of blur and you can't tell whose will is whose, and it just become this pack,
wow.
and
Yeah.
so luckily I did that because you always think you'll remember things, right? And then later you're like, oh, I can't remember, what was that? And I would find notes later. I'd completely forgotten these calls and these experiences. So thank goodness at the time I had the wherewithal to write all this stuff down. And ultimately, I had made Bragg a promise that I would write a book about it. And of course, be careful what you promise, right? So once I did that, I knew I had to do it, and I put it together, and it was my first book,
Yeah.
and it was very personal, so it was surprisingly difficult. It's revelatory, right? You talk about
Yeah.
if you really want to tell a story properly, you can't put up a wall, and so I would give drafts to people and other writers, and they kept pushing me, saying, "Oh, you gotta, we need more of you in the story. Like you're trying to write the story with you being invisible. That's not how it works, right?" So ultimately, I ended up with this story, and shopped it around, and had publishers that really liked it, and wanted to do certain things with it. And again, we were in kind of a funny time in our country.
Yes. Yeah.
And I didn't want to wait anymore. So, and this kind of goes back to your question earlier about, opportunities to do things independently.
Yeah.
I decided to publish it independently, and it just came out last week, and it's been so much fun.
Wow.
I think that there's a lot of things that publishers can put into play that you cannot do independently.
Yeah.
However, for me, the opportunity to have control of it and kind of decide where it goes from here and how much time I put into it, I think was probably more valuable than I realized at the outset. So the book is out, and my favorite part has been hearing from people about it. I've heard people that I haven't talked to in 6-10 years have reached out and talked to me, and just random people have reached out, and that's really, I hope that continues, because that's by far my favorite part.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to read it. I have a copy, as you know. I'm a
Oh,
bit
excellent.
scared, though. I'm a bit scared of reading it because I get really upset at animal deaths. So I'm not sure
no.
how I'm going to deal with some of
Yeah.
this content in the book, but I will read it, obviously, and I will put it on my blog and point everyone to where they can buy it, obviously, too. So, yes.
Fantastic.
Yes. So this was a whole completely different writing experience for you. And are you going to continue that way, do you think?
I definitely don't want to continue in that nonfiction department. First of all, I'm a terrible researcher, so the only nonfiction book I could write really was my own.
Yeah.
And I just don't think it's necessarily where my heart wants to go. I think I had one book, about that experience, and I wouldn't trade anything. But I don't think I'm a nonfiction writer. I really like, making stuff up. So I suspect that's probably the direction I'll go. It does, open up this whole kind of idea for independent publishing now that I didn't know anything about.
Yeah.
And you end up with kind of a crash course, in this process. And it's kind of like streaming. I mean, it's pretty cool that anybody can put something out there, and there's a lot of work, I'm sure, that no publisher would ever touch, that has a real audience, that's completely unique and wonderful.
Yeah.
And now, for virtually no cost, someone can get it out there, which is great.
I think that's
so
brilliant.
For no matter what you write, no matter what you create, the world is definitely changing. It's definitely more opportunities to get things done, no matter where you are. And I think that's really great.
Thank you for sharing that powerful message for all of us trying to scrape through and do it. I think it's really good. Thank you, David.
Yeah, you bet.
That was my
last.
That was my last question, so I wasn't lying. So thank you anyway, and hopefully I'll catch up with you in another few years on the Mighty Dragon and see where you're at and what you're doing.
Fantastic.
Okay, take care. Speak to you soon. Bye.
Nice talking to you. Okay, bye-bye.
Big thanks to David Hedges for joining me on The Mighty Dragon. The links to his latest book, Werewolf, are on my blog. Go check it out.